Let's talk first to Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, the Chancellor's second in command. Welcome, Darren Jones. How proud are you of these cuts to disability benefits?
Well, look, the OBR assessment today was clear that we are creating an economy that is growing, where disposable income is improving, where wages are growing faster than the cost of the things that we're paying for, and we had good news this morning that inflation is coming down. All of that is to say we're creating a stronger, more resilient economy with jobs being created, 180,000 since we came into government, where for people who want to be able to work with the right support package.
All good, Darren, but it's not really an answer to my question about you've chosen a particular form of disability benefit which affects people who are too ill or too disabled to work. And you're going to halve it, and then you're going to freeze it for the rest of this decade. And these are people who aren't going to be working. It doesn't help the economy. It doesn't help get people into work. It just seems to be an absolute cut, and it's going to drive huge numbers of families in this country into poverty. Why are you doing it?
Well, there are two different types of payments. There's the personal independence payment, the PIP payment, and then the universal credit payment.
I'm talking about the latter.
You're talking about universal credit, right?
I am, the one today.
So you'll have seen that we've increased the standard rate of universal credit from £96 a week to £106 per week. We were going to put that up to £107 per week, but we decided to go at £106 per week. That's a big chunk of the £500 million of additional savings today in the welfare budget. But the universal credit rate is still increasing from £96 to £106 per week.
But people who have got a disability or a long-term illness are going to have really, really big cuts to what they're expecting. And these are not people who can easily wander off and find a job or find a job at all.
So for people who have the most significant disabilities or who can't work and won't be able to work, the system will protect them and it will support them. That's the system.
It's less than before.
The growth problem that we had in the welfare budget was that there was an extremely high rate of people getting these top-up payments that were designed originally for people with the most significant needs, when actually what they needed was an appointment in the NHS or mental health support or access to training and skills in order to be able to get to work.
So you think they don't need this money?
Well, it's what we're doing is we're investing in the support that people get so that if they have a need to be able to unlock the opportunity of going to work, we want to be with them and offer them that support so that they can then get into work. And we know that you earn more money, obviously, when you're in work than you do if you're on universal credit.
It just feels and looks like a last-minute, slightly panicky cut to the support needed for some of the most vulnerable people in the country.
It's not, because the broader reform of the system that the Work and Pension Secretary was talking about last week is coming because the system wasn't working as designed and too many people were being found. So that bit
I go for. I accept the Liz Kendall argument. You have to get more people into work. Far too many people are on invalidity benefit. Too many people are coming out of education straight onto this benefit and they can be stuck on it for the rest of their lives. I buy absolutely all that. But this cut is different. This is just a cut to the support for people who can't work at all.
Well, we have to live within our means and in line with the fiscal rules, that's true. But as I say, the good news for people who are receiving universal credit is going up quite a lot. It's going up from £96 a week to £106 per week. The difference here is between 106 and 107, but ultimately...
Well, as we both know, I'm talking about the disabled in all of this. But let me move on to, you were talking about the OBR, and I completely understand why after the Liz Truss moment, the OBR is considered very, very important. But nonetheless, this is three guys who are basically deciding everything that the government's going to do. You know, they seem to be in charge of all of this. Have they not been given, frankly, at this stage in our politics, too much power?
So it's important that you have these independent checks and balances, because too often in the past, the previous government said they were going to do something and they didn't. Or they didn't want any checks and balances, as you say, with Liz Truss as Prime Minister, and the whole thing went wrong, as everybody knows. So it's important we have those checks and balances. And look, the OBR has, for the first time ever, scored our policy changes to the planning system, thinking about how we're going to get houses being built, and said that is going to stimulate growth in the economy.
And that is a big win for you guys. I get that. Nonetheless, the OBR have also said this afternoon that if Donald Trump decides he's going to impose tariffs on us, after all, almost everything we have heard today, is for the birds. It tears up all those plans. In the context of that, would it be the right thing or the wrong thing to scrap the digital services tax?
Well, I can't comment on hypothetical scenarios that may or may not happen in the future, but
It's only a week away.
Sure. My business and trade colleague, Johnny Reynolds, is in active discussions with the American administration. As we all know, the UK has a strong trade and security relationship with the US. We are in surplus in terms of the exports that we send to the United States.
Are you worried about what might happen on Wednesday?
Well, look, my colleagues are working very hard to secure a trade agreement with the United States that's in both our interests and their interests. It's our ambition to make sure that we get that agreement concluded so that we can continue to build on our strong trading relationship.
But Trump's got us by the short and curlies, hasn't he?
Well, the United States is an important and large economy in the world. If it decides to take a different approach to global trade, whether it's direct or indirect, that affects what's going on in the world, and we have to be secure and resilient to that. But that, quite frankly, is why it's so important that we meet our fiscal rules, that we get borrowing falling as the size of the economy, that we've got the headroom back, and that we make sure public services live within their means. Because if we don't do those things, we'll be in a weaker position and less able to deal with any shocks or changes in the global economy that will affect us here at home.
And I know you can't comment on this particularly, but a lot of economists have looked at this and say, you guys are going to have to come back in the autumn and raise taxes.
Well, as you're right, it's not for me to talk about taxes and future budgets, but our spending plans that will get confirmed in June, and this is spending plans all the way through to the next election, will be on the basis of the numbers that we have had updated today from the Office of Budget Responsibility. So public sector budgets will be on that basis and will be asked to live within their means.
I've talked to David Blunkett, who, very, very experienced politician. He's dealt with many chancellors in his time. He thinks you could have pushed the fiscal rules a bit by 15 or 20 billion without the roof falling, and he thinks you're being too timid.
Well, we disagree. I mean, we've already updated the definition of debt in the budget last year, which meant that we've been able to invest over £100 billion of additional capital into public services and the economy. But in the end, it doesn't really matter how you draft your fiscal rules. It's really a question of how much debt can we afford to pay for. And because we've inherited such a huge amount of debt from the last government, we're already paying £105 billion a year in debt interest.
And he also thinks that something I know you can't talk about in detail, the digital services tax, he thinks to let Washington sort of decide what we do about that would be immoral. And I think there is a general sense that bit by bit we are, as it were, outsourcing too much of our policy to Trump's White House.
I don't think that's true. I think, as the Chancellor said today, we have to make sure that the UK is in a strong and resilient position to be able to step up and shape what's going on in the world in our best interests. That means that we have to trade on our successes, build our relationships with allies, improve our trading relationships, and make sure that we're manoeuvring ourselves in a world that's changing more quickly than it has in the past to protect British interests, which is what we're all working very hard to do.
Right, Darren Jones, nobody is suggesting it's an easy job. Thank you very much indeed for coming.